People who quit their jobs on the first day. What made you say, "I'm done with this"? Backline at McDonald's. No training. No videos. I was the only one on backline. Literally no one said a word to me. I just kinda left. I used to clean apartments and a lady hired me for a weekly 3-hour clean. On the phone she asked if I have a problem with cats. I said I don't. She said she's got a few cats. I got there and she had 27 cats, 27, in a 2-room 4th floor walk-up apartment. There were stacked kitty litter trays and car beds in every room on every surface. Even in the kitchen up on top of the fridge and on the counters. Many of the cats were sick, there was cat vomit and cat poo everywhere. This was about 20 years ago and I can still smell it. Went to work at a hotel. The owners had an apartment off the office. First day they wanted me to cook them dinner and clean the apartment. I was hired as a front desk clerk. I tried working at Taco Bell once. I knew it would be chaos but I wasn't prepared. The manager was friendly at first, but they wanted me to go right into the line for assembling food. The screens and program they use look like they're about 30 years old, so it's really complicated figuring out the orders. Everything is abbreviated so they can fit a ton of orders on the screen, and I didn't know what the abbreviations meant. The manager watched me for a second and told me what was on the first few orders, then he just left me there. I had no idea what to make. Desperately, I just started making soft tacos for every order. Which was not correct. Then I find out he's in the back smoking weed with the dishwasher. As I was tracking him down, the other guy in the assembly part was yelling that he was left there alone. Newsflash, I was useless, he was alone the whole time. I ended up leaving 30 minutes after I started. When they said, "You're allotted 7 minutes of personal time, for if you need to use the washroom, after that it gets docked from your pay." Only issue was the only washroom was 5 minutes across the building. I ended up walking out. Refused to work for a company that monitors how long it takes you to take a dump. I was hired as an office secretary. I got there for training and it was a sales job selling vacuums. You couldn't be a secretary until you were a salesperson first, and you had to sell a certain amount of vacuums. No. Worked at a distribution warehouse. I had to scan the boxes on the conveyor belt and put them in the appropriate bin to go out for delivery. 1 hour in, my scanner stopped working and they had no extras. I asked my supervisor what I could do in the meantime, but they told me to sit tight while it was fixed. 4 hours and a lunch break later, I finally got back to work. Not 10 minutes go by, and the same supervisor pulls me aside to let me know my productivity was lower than the expectation, and if it continued, I'd be fired. I reminded them my scanner had been broken most of the shift, but they literally waved their hand in a dismissing motion and reiterated what the expectations were. I went back to scanning, did maybe 2 boxes, said heck this and left my badge on the supervisor's desk on my way out. In the summer of 1973 I got a summer job carrying shingles up to the roof for the skills workers. I lasted all the way to lunch. I should add that I was 16, 5 feet 3 inches and about 100 pounds. The boss stopped by my house and gave me a check for the half day. Great guy, extremely helpful life lesson. Walked into an office job and discovered my desk was literally a cardboard box turned sideways in a dimly lit closet. Manager said it was temporary but couldn't tell me when I'd get a real workspace. Grabbed my purse and walked right out. Tim Hortons 25 years ago. First hour into my first shift. Charged me for a company outfit that had the pockets sewn shut, apparently so staff wouldn't steal cash. Then they brought the old donuts into a back room to be thrown in the trash, and I ate one before they went into the trash. The manager snapped at me and said, "If they are good enough to eat, they are good enough to pay for." And she seriously wanted me to pay for it. I explained to her that they are about to go in the trash and she told me it didn't matter. I quit on the spot and told her that I couldn't work for a company that would rather throw good food in the trash than feed their staff. I worked at Forever 21 for a grand total of 16 hours. The first 8 was paperwork and training, the second 8 was an overnight shift where they were resetting the store. The staff was getting pissy with me because I, being a new employee, did not know where anything was meant to go. Each part of the store was a type of girl, described as goth, boho, etc. There were many, I didn't know them, it wasn't included in the training, it was a literal shop based on vibes. Time came for the end of my shift and my dad was there to pick me up, it was like 4 a.m. The manager wouldn't unlock the door to let me out because they were not done yet, but my dad was literally outside and we lived 30 minutes away. I did not have my own car just yet. She refused to unlock the door and told me to get back to it and that my dad would have to wait. Which no, it isn't what I was scheduled for or what I agreed to, so I quit. Now I'm glad the company is literally falling apart. Had a 4-hour working interview at a doggy daycare. All indoors, no outdoors. 30 dogs for me and one other person. No windows. Concrete floor. Sparse toys and play gyms. It was awful. The smell was awful. The echoing barking of bored dogs was awful. I don't think I made it through the full 4 hours. Got hired at another daycare the next week, which had a massive outside area with multiple yards, and 2 indoor areas for cold days, fun agility equipment and toys, a fully filtered pool for summer, seats for me to sit in if my feet were hurting, I have fibromyalgia, etc. Loved that place, was there until I decided to move to Australia. It wasn't the first day, it was the second day. I was doing framing for condo construction right after being laid off from a previous job. It was low wages, all co-workers were young and unqualified, working outside in -30°C from dark to dark. On the second day I was talking to another guy about how much overtime we're getting doing these 11+ hour shifts, and he said they didn't get overtime. Oh. But not technically on my first day but my second. Got a part-time job at a pizza place on campus, just to earn a bit more money since my husband and I planned on moving away soon. First day was training, they went over the menu, how to make all the items and side work. Cool, everything was going well. Next day I show up and there's only one other person there, a shift lead. She lets me know it will just be me and her all day and warns me this is the busiest day of the week, so we may have to skip breaks. Tells me I'll be working the register, which no one had trained me on or set up login access for me yet. No. I told her I'm very sorry to leave her hanging, but if this is how the business is run, then I am not a good fit for it. I called the GM and let him know so that he could figure his shit out and get someone in to help her because it was not going to be me. He ended up coming in and giving me a talking to that I honestly just tuned out. When he was done, I let him know I didn't think he put the shift lead or myself in a position to succeed and I was giving my notice effective immediately. I got a job at McDonald's when I was 16. A few hours into my first shift my trainer asked me to grab something from the walk-in freezer, and when I went inside they locked me in. I couldn't get out and started panicking and banging on the door, and they didn't let me out for a solid 10 minutes. I was sobbing and freezing cold at that point and the whole crew was laughing at me. My trainer told me that was my initiation and I just grabbed my bag and called my mom from the pay phone and sat outside crying waiting for her. She went back in the next day and I'm not sure what came of that, but I'm sure she tore somebody a new asshole. Luckily this was back when you could just walk into a business and get a job that day, so I was working at a grocery store a few days later and did not have to endure any more walk-in freezer panic attack initiations. Getting hired as a database analyst at a medium-sized company and the boss asking me to go make him a cup of coffee and bringing it to him. Got my coat and walked out the door, telling everyone it was nice meeting them on my way out. Hired as a manager for a GameStop. Day one I walk in and get told that I'll be the only person working till close. Every time I ever went in there were at least 3 people working. Here are your list of tasks. You must meet sales goals. You need a certain number of pre-orders, etc., etc. You get the idea. I just looked at him and said, no thank you, and left. Had another job where I didn't actually say, I'm done with this, but more I thought they were done with me. It was a company that lauded themselves as being specifically for placing disabled or handicapped people into working roles, often janitorial to be honest. Sounded like a good place. I got confused when I arrived and didn't realize that I was supposed to be in an auditorium and ended up walking in a few minutes late. I'm not a social person and generally prefer to sit quietly. The front rows were filled, so I sat a few rows back. As I'm watching their presentation of how wonderful their company was, red flag? A man a few rows up looks back at me and says, you can have my seat if you want. He was seated in the middle of a row with someone on either side of him. Needless to say, I didn't like the idea of sitting next to a complete stranger, so I politely declined and said, no thank you. I'm comfortable here. He immediately became visibly upset and raised his voice. People noticed. Then you can go home. I don't want you working for my company. Turned out he was the owner of the company and was upset that I refused his magnanimous offer of sitting with him and his friends. They called me 2 days later and asked why I haven't shown up for work. I explained that the owner told me he didn't want me at his company, so I assumed I was fired. They told me that I misunderstood the situation. I later found out that their main job was janitorial at corrections department. They would hire people with mental disabilities to work janitorial at local jails, near inmates. Kinda glad of that misunderstanding. While going through orientation I was told that the benefits and pay rate I was offered were a mistake and the ones I actually signed for were a lot less. Literally dropped what I was holding and walked out. Not me but my father. He was going to work for some big metal casting company. But on his first day they warned everyone not to throw anything into the vat of molten metal. They then showed a video of a production plant exploding because some guy tossed a can of soda into the vat of molten metal. My dad stood up after the video was over and walked out. When I started nursing school, our first semester was lab only. The second semester we started in-hospital clinicals. Our first day of our first clinical, I saw a fellow student in the parking lot, and so we walked in together to help each other. The doors of the elevator opened to the geriatric floor, and we got slammed in the face with stale urine and shit smell. It was bad. The girl turned to me, her face pale white, eyes wide, and said, "I don't think I can do this." She quit nursing school that day. Not quite my story. But I was an impacted observer. I was working in a fast food kitchen and the sous chef had someone in on a trial. It was a 4-hour unpaid trial. Where I live, the employer and employee can both call the trial quits at any time if they feel they're not a good fit. The trial was working on the deep fryers during a busy service and decided it wasn't for them. They told the sous chef they were leaving and started making their way out. The sous chef was thick and slow to process things in general. The sous chef said to the trial, "No, I need you to stay on the fryers. Your trial's not over yet." Trial continued to walk out and reminded the sous chef they had no obligation to stay. The shocked Pikachu face on the sous chef's face is something I'll never forget. Sous chef and fast food place just won't go together in my head. As a very young man, I accepted a job at a massive supermarket. My job was in the butcher department on the graveyard shift. I started, all was normal. I was trimming, slicing, and packaging pork chops. Fairly simple and straightforward. After I had spent basically 8 hours doing this, I had 3 large garbage bins full of fat. The other guys dragged the bins to the corners of the room and proceeded to have a fat fight, just chucking the fat at each other and laughing their heads off. Then, for cleanup, they just swept up what they could see and did nothing else. Not only did I not go back for a second shift, but I've never bought meat AF any of those supermarkets again. In high school, I took a job stocking shelves at Target. I was assigned to around 15 aisles, starting with makeup and going down to pet supplies. I spent 5 hours stocking the section, fronting the product, and making sure all the labels were front-facing. Went back to my supervisor so she could check it over. She went to the very first aisle I had completed and started ripping me to shreds. There was product on the floor, product in the wrong spot, etc. I reminded her that I started on this aisle and it had 5 hours of customers run through it, and asked her to check the last few aisles I had just completed. She refused and wrote me up. I laughed, clocked out, and never came back. I was hired to manage a storage facility in SW, Florida. The ad for the job said, "Can you sit for 7 out of 8 hours?" I was hired and went in the first day and met another employee before the zone manager came in. She looked at me and said, "You should think about wearing long sleeves." She said that I would be out in the sun the majority of the day pulling weeds and sweeping the outdoor areas. When the zone manager walked in, she told me to get in a golf cart with her and she would show me around. I walked outside with her and asked if what I was just told was true. She said yes. I asked what happened to "Can you sit for 7 hours?" She said, "Oh, come on, no one could think that was serious." I just got in my car and went home. Many years age, I took a position as a cashier at Michael's. I worked day 1. The perfumes or other products that gave off odors were overpowering. I finished the first day. Left a note after clocking out, stating that I would not be returning due to my physical reaction to the environment. They eventually paid me for the day of work. I got a part-time job on weekends at a Dunkin' Donuts near me. I had told the manager in the interview that I worked at one 25 years ago. I walk in my first day and she hands me a nasty dirty apron and used hat. Then she tells me to get on the drive-through window and ring up people because I did it before, 25 years ago when the menu was completely different and a different POS system. Then all the staff was laughing how they never got trained either, like it was a badge of honor. It took all I had not to pretend I was going to the bathroom and never return. I lasted a whole shift, 5 hours, and never went back. I got a part-time job on weekends at a Dunkin' Donuts near me. I had told the manager in the interview that I worked at one 25 years ago. I walk in my first day and she hands me a nasty dirty apron and used hat. Then she tells me to get on the drive-through window and ring up people because I did it before, 25 years ago when the menu was completely different and a different POS system. Then all the staff was laughing how they never got trained either, like it was a badge of honor. It took all I had not to pretend I was going to the bathroom and never return. I lasted a whole shift, 5 hours, and never went back. Not mine, but in the early 2000s the Dilbert site had list of the day, with answers to different questions posted, and this question came up. Someone got an office job, started on a warm spring day so only wore a light jacket. Come lunchtime they went out to get a sandwich, leaving the jacket. When they came back, the building was being raided by the feds. Decided that a new jacket was only a few bucks, so just kept walking. Working at a local bakery. It was a shame because it was a place that was pretty core to my childhood but hadn't been in years. Applied, got hired basically right away, which should have been my first yellow flag. But man, it was cheap. And gross. German bakery using just oil instead of butter, cheap super processed pre-made fillings, not terribly sanitary or considerate of allergens, signs of a toxic work environment, and a really weird set of, arguably illegal rules that employees were asked to sign. Got hired by an insurance company, after specifically telling them if the position was door-to-door sale that I wasn't interested. Showed up for training and the guy almost immediately starts talking about door-to-door sales. I said, "Let me just stop you right there. I said I wasn't doing that when I was being interviewed and I meant it. Thanks for wasting my time." The audacity of that man to look shocked is still with me 20 plus years later. Got offered a job on a TV show set, wrangling extras. This was not a well-known project, but every single person there acted like an A-list star that was disgusted by the presence of anyone that could not advance their position/stardom in some way. Even parents of extras. They would show up with their personal demands. I cussed out 4 people before lunch and then just left during lunch and never came back. It was a call center and it was awful. We had a break 2 hours in and literally everyone left the office to go to the parking lot and just stand there. Nobody spoke to anyone. It was bizarre to say the least. At lunch I got in my car to go get some lunch and did so, and then realized my car would take me anywhere but the call center, so I just went home and ate my lunch. It was a Wendy's spicy chicken burger, fries, and a chocolate frosty. It was the only good point of my day. Went in to interview for a job at an insurance company, was 19 working at Starbucks, so I was stoked for an office job. Showed up to 30 people sitting in a room. The manager stood in front and gave a sort of motivational/intimidating speech about work ethic. Said only 1 or 2 people would be getting the job today. He called us back into his office one by one to interview us. I finally get called in. Interview is, "Do you have a car? Do you have a computer? Can you use a computer?" I was the only one that got the job. They took me to their front office where a lady starts signing me up for training, and they tell me I have to pay for the upfront cost, $200. I'm weirded out, but I'm about to put in my card number on the site when I heard the manager call the front desk lady Mom, and I stood up and said I needed to think about taking this job, then left. What I was hired to do was oversee an after-school program that was 15 to 20 minutes from my home. Was a $25,000 salary job, not huge, but this was in 2010, so it was livable. When I showed up for training, I was informed I was now a backup teacher that was on call. It was a 45-minute drive in good traffic, and if they didn't need me that day I was sent home and paid for the time I was there. It was roughly 30 miles one way. I would have lost wages on the travel and gas. I called in the next day and they were so pissed that I did this to them. I was hired at one of those trampoline places. They told us very explicitly that even if a bone is sticking out of someone's leg from a bad fall, we must remain calm. I decided it wasn't worth $7.25 an hour, checked my email and saw I had another, less gory job offer and quit on the spot. The whole company was run out of a single giant Google Sheet. The workplace processes were completely confusing and convoluted. The person training me bragged that she had 3 computers running and used 7 screens to keep on top of all the things she was multitasking. To cap it all off, the way that we, the 5-ish staff of the company, were meant to keep in touch was through a single Discord voice chat that we were expected to always be in. In my only shift, there were multiple times that people would be having a full-on conversation in there and the rest of the employees I guess just tuned it out while they were working on other things. Absolutely bizarre working environment. At the end of the shift I tried to talk myself into staying, I'll get used to it, etc. But thankfully I realized how much I was dreading the next shift and sent off the, "I don't think it's a good fit" email. Such a good decision. I made it 3 days. Posting at the local grocery store for a liquor manager. Applied, got a call the next day to schedule an interview, got hired by the end of the day. The posting said occasional cashier work as well. I worked 3 days and 2.5 of them were on cash. The other half a day I was learning from a person who was never wrong no matter what. Called the next morning and said I'm not going to be coming back. The server training me and the cook got in a fist fight. That's just kitchen work. When I walked in and the person training me said, "Honestly, I don't even know why you took this job." Worked one night as a teenager as a busboy. Saw the chef drop a chicken cutlet on the sawdust floor. He picked it up and rinsed it off to cook it. Gave me side eye and said that's what my mother would do at home. No. I quit. Caught chickens for a day. Nope.